So we want to wait on the others, or?
Okay.
Yep,
Do it. Cheap
correct.
for you. All right. I'll go by and get some bread.
Yes, sir.
Have you got a 308?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You got a gun?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I got an
That's
FN
correct.
FAL.
And then you got a password.
Ever.
Okay, well, try it again, Bobby, because you got all the right info there. I don't know why it won't let you in, but maybe just it was busy or something.
Now they got AKs.
I try. So give it a whirl. All right, thank you.
I said now they got AKs now, but they used to have.
All right, we got Bobby having trouble getting in, Chad, so we'll give him just a minute there. Well, I think so. We don't have Charles and we don't have Bobby.
The first one I had came from Australia.
Bobby Stride.
He was in Australia.
And the password for him is Dayton, all under lowercase.
We've got a corner of that. And the first one started with us. We got them rebuilt. He built probably 2 or 3 more of them. We got several of them in here. I got another one. Yes. I sold one I had, that good one I had. I sold it to Randolph. They kicked boy. I'll tell you that 308's a powerful. Who was the fireman that felt they had that gas? Had that gas just.
Not here.
Hey, Adam. I'm gonna check on the front door, make sure nobody's waiting.
Amy's out there.
Or then,
I think she's got to beam them in. Okay.
Bill, we're ready when you are.
Well, let me read the virus disclaimer. With our nation battling COVID-19 and the passing of Executive Order 34 by Governor Lee, governments are allowed to temporarily hold virtual meetings to protect public health, safety, and welfare. Public will not be allowed to access this meeting except by electronic means in order to limit the number of attendees to no more than 10 people as mandated. If you are interested in attending this meeting, you can use the following options. And are they, we don't have them posted anywhere or written, do we?
No, sir, I don't know if they put them out, but this is being live streamed to YouTube right now, and I'll send the city the link as soon as we're done.
I can read them out, but there's so many numbers that.
No, that's not necessary.
Okay. We'll call the May meeting, the Plan Commission to order. Reading of the procedure statement, which you've done. And item 3, the regularly scheduled meeting, monthly meeting for May 18th is being held by phone conference call. To participate, please follow the options shown above. This meeting complies with Governor Lee's Executive Order 34. Item 4, roll call by secretary.
Chairman Moore.
Here.
Vice Chairman Jones. Here. Secretary Davis is here. Commissioner Charles Davis. We hadn't been able to get in touch with Commissioner Bobby Dawes.
Here.
Commissioner Jim Lewis. Here. Commissioner Joe Runyon. Here. We have a quorum, Bill.
Okay. Can everybody hear everybody well? Do you have any volume problems or audio? Okay.
Good to hear, Bill.
Item 5, roll call by any phone participants.
Adam McCrory, City of Dayton Fire Department.
Jimmy Harrison still there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Item 7, or item 6, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. It's on page 3 from the meeting April the 20th. Okay. You have a motion to approve them?
Joe Runyon's approving. Motion.
You have a second?
Second. Ed Jones.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Need to go down the list. You want to vote by list? Hey, Bill, we need to vote by list, please.
I'm sorry.
We need to vote by roll call.
Okay. Call the roll.
Chairman Moore,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Jones. Aye. Secretary Davis, aye. Commissioner Bobby Doss.
Aye.
Commissioner Jim Lewis. Aye. Commissioner Joe Rundle. Aye. All aye, Bill.
Okay, approved. Item 7, recognition of citizens, and Jimmy Harrison's on the agenda later. And is there anybody else? Okay, communications from the chairman, none. Reports from the staff and committees, item 9.
Oh.
Dan?
Not at this time.
Item 10, old business. Consideration of workshop on affordable housing options, including tiny homes, minimum house sizes, small townhouse developments pending, and the end of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Bill, that's just to let you know, it's still out there. We haven't planned the workshop yet. We said we would. We will. We're just waiting for a better date. That's all.
Okay, so you'll let us know when you think it's appropriate?
That is correct.
Okay. 10B, consideration of Dennis Van Meter property on Blueberry Hill Road.
Bill, that's, I think everybody's got some information in front of them on that. That was a item that came up more recently, but we found some old information on that. We turned him down on some moving ahead with a R3 type development because we thought it was an R1. It actually got changed to an R3 in 2007, approved by the city council. Everybody's got a copy of that there in front of them. And I feel like I need a little direction on what y'all want to do and tell me how to go forward with that.
Has Mr. Van Meter been told of this?
No, he has not. I'm waiting for direction from you guys first.
We've had this around for so long. Everything we told him to do, he's done. Except for the R3, and we found out it was already an R3. So that's taken care of. So he's done everything that figure out here that he's supposed to do. And I think that we ought to just go ahead and let it go ahead and develop it the way he wants, that he's presented it to us, but it's legal. I'll put that in the form of a motion or anything we need, but.
The left map on your screen shows the map as we thought it to have existed. The right map on your screen or in your packet shows the map as it should have existed. And so I think we've already got an R3. I think it's a matter of just letting them know it is an R3, but you guys are the planning commission. So. I guess my only question would be, and I understand, but did you see the minutes of the planning meeting that approved that to go to city council to be made in R3? You should have that document in your package there. Let's see where that is. Well, let me find it for you.
Ray,
It's that pullout.
that was Dr. Horton's father-in-law that, it was that time, but at that same time there.
Here it is, Dan. I've got it on the screen.
Oh,
There, he's got it up on the screen.
Let me make it a little bit bigger here so we can see it.
I don't know if we trust the city recorder on that screen up there.
Yeah, Chad, this is the ordinance where the city council
Oh, I'm sorry.
approved it to go R3. But what I'm asking is, the planning commission had to recommend it to go to city council. Is that true?
Yes, sir, that would have been correct. And just to give you a little bit of backstory on how we've gotten to this point, Dan has been going through the ordinance books, and we found quite a few ordinance zoning map changes that never made it onto the zoning map. And so we have gone through and worked with Dan, and our GIS technician has updated the map, and we'll be looking at that a little bit later in the meeting. But in doing so, he had come across this one. So we've been operating under the impression it was an R1 because that's what your current zoning map stated. Dan was able to pull this document up here. This was from 2007, showing that it was rezoned to R3. And so that's what we're bringing to you tonight. Now, as far as his, Mr. Van Meter's original proposal to do the cottages, they originally did not propose putting them on individual lots. So if this zoning stands, it would allow him to probably do a little bit more dense development than the last version we saw from him, but he still would have to subdivide property.
And I understand all of that, Chad, but my question still is, did the planning commission approve this lot to go to R3 in 2007?
Grady, the only documentation I've seen are the whereases in this document that Chad has on the screen now.
That's all I've seen.
The second one and the fourth whereas.
That's the reason I'm asking the question. Does it not have to go to the planning commission?
Yes, sir. It would have started with the planning commission for a recommendation. And to be honest, we didn't go through and pull the minutes from this time frame to see if it was recommended. So that I couldn't tell you with any certainty.
To answer your question, I did not go back and look at the planning commission meeting prior to for that. If that had to be the planning commission.
Okay.
And I don't have the minutes from the 2007 meeting, so, but all I can go by is what's on the screen now.
I will look in my file, but I'm not sure I will have any minutes from back then.
Should be somewhere.
There's a pretty good chance I can look in the office. I don't know if we want to hold this meeting.
No, I don't know. It's a question. That's a good question. Did it ever go to the planning commission? I don't remember everything we've done in the last 20 years, and I definitely don't remember this. I remember when they presented it to us to develop it for townhouses. That was Dr. Horton's father-in-law. Yes. I remember when they brought it up, we were going to do that, but I don't ever remember doing it.
May I speak? This is Commissioner Doss. May I speak?
Yes.
On this building inspector department on the second page there from where the ordinance was, it looks like it was done with Tom Best. The signature on this building inspector's department when Don Lazinski, is that his name? It shows from map 090 parcels, and it tells the parcels between Highway 30 East and Blueberry Hill Road. The owner's name was Best. So Tom Best must have owned contractor and buyer, and it says specific ordinance variance desired, zoning changes from R1 to an R3. That was August the 9th, 2007.
Also on your screen, I went back through our minutes. This was back from when I still worked for state local planning. Shannon Copus was the planner. These were his notes from August the 20th, 2007. And I found this was the property here, and it was recommended. It was only 3 lots. There was a concern of it being spot zoning, and it said a motion was made and seconded to recommend to the city board.
I see it. That's your recommendation right there.
Is that letter in our packet?
No, sir. This is just on our server. I went and pulled the files
Okay.
from what we had from back then.
For 4 lots.
But this, like I said, this was just the planner's minutes that he wrote at that meeting.
Well, does it say there that we,
Yes, sir. It says right here, and a motion was made and
Okay.
seconded to recommend to the city board, and it included 3 parcels. And it was to go from R1 to R3 at the intersection of Blueberry Hill Road and State Route 30. Tom Best was the property owner.
okay.
So it never was changed on the map then after that was done. That's correct.
And that's how this was found. Was checking the zoning map against the ordinances. Amy pulled every ordinance from the city council from that had to do with zoning from current all the way back to 2004. And that's what we did to update the map in
Yeah.
order to have updated map. So that's how this was found.
Chad, was this declared spot zoning in 2007?
That was a concern at the time, yes, sir, because there's one parcel that stands between, I should put it back on the screen. There's one parcel here that stands between this R3 zoning and that's this one right here. It's still an R1 zone.
Now, does the corner touching, how does that play into that, Chad? I don't know, I'm mistaken. If you look across the road, there's a small track on the other side, right below where you've got that hand sitting. The red line goes right through it, right there. All right.
Correct.
So,
And sometimes we do zone across roadways and consider it to be a connection that way. I mean, you could probably make a case for that, but generally we try not to leave lots in between other lots that aren't compatible with the zoning district.
understood.
So I still don't know whether it went to the planning. Who was, hey, Chad, take me back to that document.
The planning commission one or the signed ordinance?
The planning commission.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't read real good, so read that number 1 to me, please.
Okay, let me zoom in here. So this was a zoning change from R1 to R3 at the intersection of Blueberry Hill Road and State Route 30. Tom Best was the property owner at the time. And like I said, this is the planner's notes from that meeting. It was Shannon Copus. The above request involves 4 lots that have been recently annexed by the city and currently zoned R1. Tom Best is an owner of 3 of the lots in the request. These lots all front on Highway 30 and have adequate utilities in place. Staff informed the commission that the request is feasible. There are already some duplexes in the general area, and there's already a lot of R3 zones in Dayton located on state highways and in the general area. These 4 lots in question currently abut an existing R3 zoning district. Staff informed the commission that all of the lots needed to be zoned R3. The commission discussed only 3 lots, but the staff stated that this could be considered a spot zone since there would be a gap in the R3 zone. A motion was made and seconded to recommend the rezoning to the city board, and the motion carried unanimously.
Okay, all right. You answer my question.
So you got your answer?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I still think Dan wants some direction on how to proceed with Dr. Van Meter. Just have him go talk to him and tell him to resubmit what he has.
I think he can build per the R3 requirements. Grady.
Greg, I think I have what you're saying. I'm not sure. I think it was R3.
It was.
It was, yeah.
I think he can do what he wants to per the R3 requirements.
That's what it seems to be.
Well, that's me. We've had him jump to do a whole lot of hoops.
Yeah. I think Dan should tell him that it's R3 and what we should go by, what he wants to submit. If it was the prior one, was his first drawing based on R3?
No, sir. In fact, it was just a request to the commission to look at doing it without having to do any division of land. And so he was looking at doing it as like a planned unit development. So there was no proposal based on the consideration of zoning for R1 or R3 at that time.
Okay.
The last proposal he submitted was drafted with actual individual lots based on the R1 zoning.
Okay, so we need to get from him what he wants to do with R3.
Correct. And here's the R3 zone, if you're curious how that makes a difference to what is required. The minimum lot size requirement is 7,500 square feet, but multifamily lots have to be 10,000. So he's wanting to do individual cottages, so he'd be going down to 7,500 square feet. Compared to in the R1 zoning district, the minimum lot size would have been around 10,000 square feet with sewer, or 15,000 square feet without.
Okay, and
I've got
go
I've
ahead,
got one
Bobby.
question. You know, how's this going to affect, you know, what the size of the cottages he's going to build with our housing about our tiny homes that we're fixing to have a workshop on?
So the
About
minimum
the
square
square
footage
footage.
on his, and Dan can correct me on this, but I know it was 900 total, but that included, I think, an overhang or a carport. So
That included a garage, didn't it? Or a carport?
This is Dan.
Did
That
include
included,
a carport?
that included the carport. That was a one-car carport included in that approximate 900 square foot. Yes.
And what does he need to do about sewer and roads in R3?
Well, that's in the process. The sewer's in discussion, and the road, I don't believe the road changes. If it does, it's going to be very, very minimal, but I'm not aware of any changes to the road off the top of my head.
So the road right of ways are going to be 50 feet?
The net effect for him is more lots than he would have been able to have had in an R1.
Okay. But
Dan?
what about the sewer though?
The sewer is something that has got to go in either way, unless he wanted to keep it to a larger piece of land and go with septic tanks, because basically right now the sewer is unavailable unless there's an extension to the sewer system, which would be typically his responsibility at the moment. Excuse me, there's a little discussion on that with the city, but the sewer would be his responsibility to get it there and run it wherever he's going to run it. If he goes to septic tanks because sewer's unavailable, then there's no sewer in front of the properties right now. So if he does that, he would have a additional burden of getting the septic tank and field lines on the lots. And he would also have to look more closely at the terrain in subdividing them, which would limit further the amount of homes that he gets on it.
But he could put in septic tanks.
Yes, but he couldn't get as many lots that way because
Okay.
of restrictions on the steepness, on the being able to repeat the system later on the same lot and some things like that. So it would further restrict the number of lots that he was able to build upon.
And is the city continuing to look at sewer for this development?
The city I know has looked at allowing this development to hook into this sewer. Where they're at on whether who's going to run what, I don't know that answer.
If I may speak, this is Bobby Dawes.
Yes, sir.
I think the problem is we got to bore into the highway, and that's going to be a real cost. And so I think that's what the deal is right now. To tie in, to get the sewer on that side of the road, we'd have to bore into the highway. Is Tom there? Correct me if I'm wrong, Tom.
Tom
stepped up for a minute.
Tom had to step out for a minute, and you're correct. There is a bore associated with the cost. And there's also, best of my memory, I want to say 300 feet that the sewer line would have to be run further up the highway before it would be available at these three tracks. So there's a couple issues there, and that, of course, drives the cost of getting the sewer there up. So right now, there's not sewer available at those properties.
I still think Dan should talk to him. But I think it's kind of good news that it's R3, which gives him some flexibility. But the bad news is he's got to consider this sewer if he wants it. The cost of that.
But he understands.
I think he's well aware of that. Yeah, it's, of
Okay.
course, if he doesn't consider it and doesn't want to pay for it, then it may just be the whole subdivision doesn't happen.
I figured he'd have to pay for it.
Well,
Our issue is whether it's,
I don't want to pay for it for him.
yeah,
Why
no.
should we? We don't have sewer. That's right.
Our issue is, are we gonna roll with it being an R3 and can I tell them, I think that's what we're talking about.
yeah,
Like, in there, I don't remember it, but if they got the paperwork that says that they did it, they said, oh, we want, I figured.
Well, here's the other reason we wanted to discuss it tonight, and the map that we're going to discuss a little bit later. Sometimes communities will go back and readopt a zoning map in its entirety, which means they're certifying all the zones as they are now. And that's why I wanted to check with you tonight too, to make sure that since this passed, has that been done? I couldn't find a record of it, but I couldn't say for sure.
Ted, I think you might have to repeat that. I didn't follow what you said there.
yeah. What has been done? Has the map been adjusted?
No, what I was saying is sometimes a community will readopt the entire zoning map in its entirety, which is essentially certifying the zones as they are shown on that map.
Okay.
And so what we wanted to make sure is that since all of these have changed, as far back, we had about probably 24 of these that we made the updates after Dan had found the ordinances that never made it on the map. And so we wanted to just make sure that a zoning map had not been adopted that would have reverted any of these changes.
Okay, I understand your question now. Did you guys follow up?
What about the roads building in there? Need to ask Adam how much the fire trucks go. The fire trucks have to have to wide road to go in there to the fire,
Adam,
Yes.
correct me if I'm wrong, but if we follow the ordinances on the roads and stuff that are in the planning regulations, the subdivision regulations, are we gonna be good from a fire standpoint?
I believe it was 20 some odd feet unobstructed, and the two-way,
You're speaking about paving width, correct? A right-of-way width is much larger.
Right, yeah, the actual paved road, the width of the paved road was, I believe, 26 feet unobstructed, and on the main, and then the side roads, I think, could be smaller, but it had to be unobstructed.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, from a fire standpoint, you guys are good with the city regulations as they exist, so that if we enforce the city regulations for road width as they exist, we shouldn't have a problem? Is that correct?
Right, and I believe the only other thing was grade and the angle of approach and angle of departure, but they appeared to be that they were in good shape. It wasn't like too steep of a, from Highway 30 onto the road or vice versa. They appeared to be okay.
Adam, did you say they had to be two-way roads?
Yes, I mean, typically it would be a two-way road because we would generally probably be approaching it from Highway 30,
Mm-hmm.
and to make the turn back onto Blueberry and then back onto that road would be pretty difficult in a fire truck.
Okay.
So if we could approach it from Highway 30, and then our Station 2 engine would approach it 27 to Blueberry and onto that road. So we'd be approaching things from two different directions. Yes.
Jim, did we answer that question? Okay.
Anything else? Any other discussion on this issue?
Did Ted basically say we could adopt the old R1 map to be the map of record?
I think, Chad, you gonna answer that?
I didn't quite understand his question. I just got that he was talking about adopting an R1 map as a map of record.
Yes. Is that what you said a minute ago?
No, what I was asking was, had the zoning map been adopted in its entirety? I don't think that it has been. So I think all of these, unless we prove it otherwise, stand as they have been approved. So what happens is, if we don't get a signed copy of the ordinance, the official zoning map doesn't get updated. And like I said, there was about 24 that Dan had found that never made it into our hands over the course of over 10 years. So the map never reflected those. Now, I know Ronnie used to keep a map in his office, and he'd make updates on it and write on it that way too. So I don't even know if these changes had made it on that one or not, because we would always work with him in trying to make sure the zoning maps are correct. So, all these changes have not been reflected on the map that's published online or in the map that we've held to be your official map. So that's what we're trying to make these changes. So I think this one stands, unless there's any other information to the contrary.
Stands at R3.
Yes, sir.
Thought his mouth was behind the door.
Chad, let me see if I understand this correctly. Were you basically asking, have we adopted a different zoning map in the last several years?
Yes, that's what I was asking.
Okay. Does anybody remember any kind of an adoption of a different zoning map? So the answer would be no.
Okay.
So do we need to adopt a zoning map as of the next meeting or some subsequent meeting?
Well, that's what we want to talk about a little bit later on in this meeting, is we want to present the map that has the changes Dan had submitted to us, to you. And if that looks okay and we've got the ordinances to back it up, well, I told him what would probably be best, since we've been operating so long with it not being correct, we'd probably like to recertify it as it is, which would mean getting a recommendation from the Planning Commission and the City Commission recertifying the map.
Okay.
It changed, he was just adding his map on the wall, and we never did consider consolidating all of them in a vote to extend it.
So let's jump to that here in just a minute, if you don't mind. I guess what I want to do is put this last thing to bed. Are we good for me to speak with?
I don't have any objection. Then anybody else have any comments on?
That's coming over. That's coming over. No, I don't. That's just somebody trying to reach me. Oopsies. Okay, we're good. That showed up on, messed our screen up a little bit. That call was on my iPad.
I don't, a lot of think it's an R3.
I'm in agreement with that.
I think it's an R3 now, but we missed. Yeah.
Okay, so I might as well jump into that since we're there then. Bill, you good if we jump into that map discussion?
Well, I was going to go to C for Jimmy Harrison,
Okay.
and then we can go over to that. Jimmy's been waiting, and we need to talk about his property.
If you got your answer on that, maybe.
I think so. It might be nice if we added in something concrete in case we have to look back in the minutes.
I thought I made it. So make it again. Just write it any way you want to. You and I think a lot of times.
Okay. Bill, you ready with Jimmy Harrison?
Yes.
Okay, we talked last month and maybe the month before that a little bit about Jimmy Harrison and his project on College Street. College Street is zoned in R3. Jimmy has built townhouses by International Building Code definition. He has built them in an R3 to an R3 zoning standard for apartments. And so solving that dilemma, as you guys are aware, is what we're talking about. I think I have a page in here that, you know what? I might have put that page in with the next meeting based on.
Maybe you put all that in.
That's right, because this discussion was the planning commission, Jimmy has to come to the planning commission with a plat for what he wants to do in terms of a townhouse subdivision. So if the Board of Zoning Appeals is not going to give the variances, there's no point in him bringing a plat. So if you jump to your BZA minutes or notes for just a minute, on page 5, there's an outlined little discussion here.
It's on the screen, Dan.
Well, very good. Thank you, Chad. So we would, it boils down to 5 or 6 variances if we were going to do it. The question becomes, the townhouses are townhouses by building code definition. They're apartments by zoning definition. And so the 6 variances are a variance on a space between buildings, a variance on the setbacks from the sidelines in reference to the north end of the building. All buildings must be 35 feet from the boundary lines, okay? Variances on the front setback from the road from 35 to 25. In an apartment area, they have to be 25, and that's what Jimmy exceeded when he built those, but he didn't go to the 35. There would be no variance required on the density of the lots as long as the additional lot on the north end is rolled into the other lots as one parcel, because but that's what it's supposed to be based on the zoning code anyway when we have a small lot of record. There's a parking variance needed probably for one parking place, and that's possibly able to overcome if it comes to it. But and then there is room for the question becomes, what do we want to do on this? Do we want to grant 6 variances or 5 variances on one property, or how are we going to handle this?
Did we ever have that many variances on one property? I'd like to know that people in line do that ahead of time before they get into something like this, where they've got to come to us for all these variances and do one thing or. Well, that Jimmy, the highest county was, yeah. Is there any way that you can get with Jimmy and figure out what he would have to do, get what he needs, exactly what he needs to get? I don't know what he's going to have to. I'd hate to set him down for one thing and it tear him up, because I know we bought it under a good.
So let me interject a thought here. If you go to the back, page 6, 7, 8, 9 of your package is going to be a discussion. Actually, it's an ordinance from our zoning ordinance. It starts with 14.08, fee simple residential townhouse development. And these are our zoning ordinances as it pertains to townhouses. One of the problems with these is they appear to fit much more neatly a larger townhouse development. There's quite a few places that are doing very small townhouse developments that are going to be similar to Jimmy's, and those would actually have probably a lot less rules than this, and could provide for maybe even more spacious or perhaps even a longer term or owner's interest in the property, maybe better than an apartment would, and provide for nice housing in the future on a smaller scale. I think that maybe if we were to look at some smaller townhouse development rules down the road, we may be able to fit Mr. Harrison into those kind of nicely at a later date. I don't know that there's anything other than, you know, hey, we're going to give you a variance for this, and saying it that many times that I can come up with to make it exactly what, you know, and so we're left with, if we do approve 5 or 6 variances on a property, now we've set a precedence of, hey, the rules.
Somebody be buying this stuff to tack on and do that for the sake of something that we can do. I want him to get where he can do what he wants to with his property there since he's already got it done. But I don't want us to get in a position that they come back and say, well, you did it for him on this, you know, and there's something that they come along now. But anybody else come up with all that stuff like that, I'd be looking at something to just make it hard on everybody.
So Chad pointed out last month that he has the option of doing condominiums for sale if he wants to do sale. He has the option of calling these apartments, and then he can fit more in there if he does that. And then there is the option of when we do our workshop, we look at some more affordable housing options for townhouses. There's a number of places we could go and look at on the internet or something that
Has
are.
he indicated what he would be willing to take on?
Jimmy, I'm gonna let you answer that.
I did not hear the question.
That's a very good question. On these apartments that you're stuck with, or condos, or whatever they are, Jimmy, with the options that we have, without us really screwing up everywhere, future and now, what would you want on this, and what would you and Dan discussed anything on this, what we could do that would, as the old Japanese custom says, I won't say Chinese, and save face.
Well, we discussed having the workshop and talking about the smaller townhouse developments. We also discussed condos, and with condos, the person don't actually own the property, so you have to figure out a condo association and have a fee for that, and there would be separate billing for tax purposes on the property. We discussed a lot of things.
Jimmy,
Yes.
this is Bill. Are you open to renting them until we can get something further worked out?
I'm not done with them yet.
I know.
Yes, I am.
So
I am open for that.
Okay, so that's an option. And then on the, Chad, could you put up the 6 variances that would be
Sure.
required? You had it up earlier. There. Okay. On number 4, to meet that, is the north lot available?
I've already purchased the north lot. It's 50-foot lot. It rolled into the other 200-foot lots.
So has he met that variance number 4?
But I would also like to build a couple of townhouses on those lots,
Okay,
on that lot.
okay. But that's something you could decide. And then on number 6, can you show that again?
Sure.
Did number 6 pertain to the parking?
The required recreational space says you have room for it. So
Yes,
is
sir.
that required? If you have the room, does that mean you still need a variance?
Wouldn't on that. It would just be billed to an association as far as tax purposes. But I do have enough room for a recreational part of it.
Okay, so are we down to 5 variances then?
The parking's a non-issue as well.
So you don't need
I
any
do have
additional,
room.
you don't need additional
I do.
parking?
No, sir. I have the 3 extra spots
Okay,
at a 10 by 20.
the north lot then is, I guess, an issue. She'd rather build on that than roll it into these other 2 lots. But you do need a setback then, number 3, and number 2 and number 1. Number 1, you really can't, well, I don't know how much the variance would be there because they're already up, but
What is number one?
Variance on space between buildings.
Correct. And with that, if I built another townhouse between those two buildings, then that would null and void that variance with less parking. And I don't understand that.
Okay.
What Jimmy was just pointing out is that if we did this as apartments and not as townhouses, as the zoning code is concerned, then he could fill that space that exists between the buildings with apartments and still meet our zoning code, and it would be even more dense than what we're making them do by this townhouse regulation.
I could put another townhouse between those two buildings and fit and wouldn't need a variance and be less parking. If I connected those two buildings with an additional unit between them, I would have less parking and the variance would be null and void. I don't want to do that because it wouldn't be good. It'd make it look different.
But you are up to considering renting them initially, and then the long run though, you want to be able to sell them.
Yes, sir. I would like to be able to sell them as individual units as per townhouses.
Yes.
Like I said, I'm not done. You're talking about how long would that take?
We can't answer that. That would be till we can have a workshop. Hopefully we can get it done in a workshop. If we got it done in a workshop, it would have to go to the city council. And I would guess, Chad, I don't know how many, would that be a one meeting thing or would that be a multiple meeting?
That'd be 2 meetings, and I would suspect there'd probably be several months of discussion at the planning commission level and no telling at the city commission. So you're talking about at least the absolute minimum of 3 months, but more likely than 4 or 5 or 6.
Say 3 to 6 months.
Right.
I would be open for that.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think just to clear this up too, where Dan and I had talked about this too, if you were to do these as condos, you would have to have a homeowners association, of course, but you would anyway for the extra parking because that's not going to be on an individual's lot. They'll have the right to maintain, or they're not the right, but they actually have the requirement to maintain the asphalt and whatnot for the parking or whatever is put there. So you about end up with a homeowners association either way. But if it was done as condos, from what Dan and I have talked about, I don't think there are any variants that'd be required, and they'd be ready to sell them, as soon as he's finished.
Are we looking for a motion then to say no to the variances and take this up after a workshop or during a workshop? Yes, he did.
Let's do that. Have a workshop on it. This is a problem. We've had semi-problems like this before.
And they'll come up again.
And they're going to keep coming up until we get it settled once and for all.
Yeah.
We can do that. I got to wait on the workshop to discuss the options. That's what we need to do then. I agree and disagree. I'm talking about Jimmy Harrison's property. But on the other hand, we got to do something with it. I'm not, and I told Dan the other day, I'm not a fan of variance at all, especially multiple variants. There's 6 on here. Yes, I don't like that. But Jimmy done what Jimmy was told to do.
So do we need a motion, Bill, that we got a no on the variances? Is that
We need a motion. We need a motion to approve them, then vote it down.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood, Bill.
We should have a motion to grant the multiple variances, 1 through 6, and then vote it down if we don't want to do 6 variances.
Well, Bill, one quick thing. This part that I have up on your screen now, that's actually part of your Board of Zoning Appeals agenda. So I think it'd just be more a vote on which way or another you're leaning at this point as to whether or not he needs to bring forth a site plan. And I think in the next BZA meeting, that's when we'll officially take action on these variances.
We're going to take action on them today.
Well, that's up to
You're
you.
right.
I mean, tonight.
That was a good point, Chad. You're correct. All we were doing, I think what we know is that the board is not interested in multiple variances.
Well, certainly not 6.
Well, that might have cut back to 4 in that there.
Yeah, but I don't remember any more than 2 at one property, and
Okay.
okay, so we'll take up the variances at the BZA, and then we'll include this in our workshop.
Yeah.
And we need to talk I think, get together with Jimmy too, to see what he can live with and how we can make this work for everyone. Okay. Jimmy, are we at a position that you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. On old business, I had an item D, the status of that 2018 code requirements. Adam, were you working on that?
We've been reading through the 2018 code. We've been reading through it and kind of taking notes and marking things that we have questions or concerns about. But I think that was something, I think Dan had recommended maybe bringing that to like some kind of a workshop also, that we could sit down and discuss all the different points of it that we had any concern about. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, what we were asking for was any input and consideration from the boards on code changes that were going to have to be made to stay within the state regulations for code currency. So we will have to change by the 1st of January or something. My guess is we want to change to the 2018, just jump all the way up from the 12, but we will have to look at that, get that approved by the council. And we were looking for guidance, input, and direction from the boards if they had any on that. And there will be things we'll want to exempt from the 2018 as well. There's quite a bit of requirements that we really don't want. My goal is to keep the 2009 energy codes and jump all the way up to the 2018 building codes and list out minimal.
This is Adam again. Funny side note, I received an email from the State Fire Marshal's office this week reminding us that state law required us to upgrade to be within the 7 years, but I don't think they're going to make it themselves. So they're going to be outside of the state law, but I guess it's okay when you're the state. So
on that note, they were outside of the state law the last time too.
Yeah.
I just brought that up that Dan had brought it to our attention last month. We need to keep it in mind and keep working on it. And we need to pass whatever we decide to the city council by October the 31st. So we've got 6 months, but things move along and then we don't get to it. And to have it in this year's, pass it by, I guess the state wants it by January 1st, I believe. Okay. 11A, consideration of temporary use permits.
I had I think you have a paper on this in here. Let's see, page 5. We have a growing number of temporary buildings around the town for business use. The question becomes how to deal with these in a fair and impartial manner. I had to write a permit for a snow cone business that is in 2 sheds combined out in front of Tractor Supply. It's going to make one little business establishment. They're going to sell snow cones. Our temporary use ordinances requires a permit. It also requires a building permit because of the size of the sheds combined. being over 200 square feet. So I have to do a building permit according to building code regulations that we adopt. I had a couple concerns with this, discussed this with the gentleman that's opening business. My main concern is our ordinances allow for a 5-month permit. That's it. There's 2 extensions able to grant to that, 1 month apiece, and then theoretically that thing goes away. There are quite a few portable businesses around town, quite a few sheds coming up different places, and we need to, I guess I'm looking for direction. One thing that I don't know that is a good thing is that if somebody asks for a permit, we give them one and enforce the ordinance. And if they don't, we don't worry about it. I don't know that that's kind of like punishing the people who want to do right or something. So I'm looking for a little direction there because we got quite a few around. You know.
Why don't we incorporate this in with this other workshop we're gonna have, and bring it up to where we can.
I'm very good with that. I think that's a good idea. I think it ties right into affordable businesses and that there's a whole lot of philosophy on free enterprise that goes with that. But at the same time, if we adopt something called the International Building Code that applies to business establishments and buildings, then, you know, how do we let other businesses, you know, so that is a great idea because that's quite a discussion, I feel like. And
Very detailed.
very detailed.
Very detailed.
Dan,
this gentleman wants to open this month. Have you been able to give him permits?
Yeah, we are actually supposed to do this for farmers market, for religious tent meetings, for all kinds of things. We, you know, it's in our, there's your, Chad's brought up the temporary use regulations. You can see one is a carnival or something there. It's a little small Christmas tree sale, temporary buildings, real estate sales office. There's 7 things listed there. So,
We're getting New York City now. 8,000. Every 6 months.
With our bill.
Did you do that?
so, you know, like I said, if somebody calls me and wants a permit, I want to do what, you know, what I'm supposed to do at the same time, you know.
Dan, does the snow cone operation have a permit to open?
The snow cone, there's a combination of things they need. Some of that involves Brandy and their business license. Some of that involves the health department. They have not had a building inspection on their sheds as of yet, and they don't have their utilities installed, but they are installing permanent utilities underground, last I was told, and I have actually written a plumbing permit for that, and I've written a, I think it was a temporary use permit, or else it was a building permit one, but I haven't done any inspections or anything as of yet. So,
What does temporary use fall in if you're installing permanent utilities?
well, I don't know that affects it so much. If I have a, you know, the utilities would stay there.
If you're there or not, then is what it basically.
Yeah.
You close in the winter, open in the summer.
So in theory, the snow cone business is going to go away at the end of 5 to 7 months. And then it could, you know, if you do permanent utilities, you could obviously bring it back next year. The gentleman doing this, I tried to encourage him kind of strongly to shoot for a food truck or a trailer or something you could take home, because that's quite a bit
Easier to do.
easier and less investment than putting a permanent structure sort of in you know, and now these sheds can be picked up on a trailer in a matter of minutes. So it's not a big deal, but he's wanting to go the way he's going. And, you know, so we did talk food trucks. Chad provided a document or a bunch of document right here on the rules and regulations from Chattanooga. for their mobile food trucks. There's some more here I printed off for from the city of Knoxville on their mobile food unit operations. And I looked in Athens and Cleveland. I didn't find anything in either one of those, but you know, we have a lot of mobile stuff popping up. So Ted, I'm good with your suggestion. I'll put this baby to bed for now.
We can do it all at one time.
So we're not going to be holding up the snow cone business at all.
No, sir. No, he will have a legitimate permit to operate for 5 to 7 months. 7 months if he gets his 2 extensions as provided for in our zoning ordinance. And then at the end of that time, you know, we'll have a shed sitting in the parking lot. I did ask him to provide me with a letter from the owner of that mall, that strip mall, that allows him to sit there, and he has 1 year permission for a snow cone business in that front yard of that business, of that.
Does he intend to operate 12 months a year?
I let him know that his intention needs to be to operate 5 months in a very kind fashion. So I don't know what his intentions are beyond that. I provided him with a copy of the ordinance.
Okay. Any other comments or discussions on 11A? Temporary use permits. 11B, consideration of discussion on zoning map.
Okay, that zoning map, the way that came out was in the office behind the door was a map hanging when I showed up, and I was familiar with that map because I've used it with Ronnie in the past from a public side. And Ronnie kept a map, and he wrote on it when there was changes. And when I started, and I really didn't have a chance for a handoff, if you will, based on circumstances, but there was also a map that existed online that was linked to on our Dayton City website. So it became my practice when I started then to check every map available. And over time, I found another map from 2011 in the office and online, but on actually in city documents. Wasn't online, it was in city, it's on the computer. So it became apparent that we had an inconsistency from Southeast Tennessee Development's map and the map behind the door and the map I found in the office. And so I took, long story short, 5 maps, and I spent a lot of time, and with Amy's help, she pulled a bunch of records, went back through each zoning ordinance that changed in the last 16 years. And then I sat down and we had updates to every map. I boiled it down to 2 that were the most accurate. And with those 2, I applied all of the changes, which I had in a ledger fashion, to both maps, and came out with those changes, sent them to Chad's office. Their map guru at Chad's office got them updated on the maps. These 2 on the table here are almost correct. They lack 4 items of being correct, but we're just not quite done. Those 4 items are just 4 individual changes where property subdivided after the change was made, and so there was a few misses that need correction and are in the process of being corrected. But that means that this zoning map is very different than the one that was behind the door, and it's very, very different from the one that was online, both of them being used as our official zoning map. So what I would like for you guys to do is say, you know, hey, That's a lot of work. That's a lot of changes. Since it is a lot of changes, let's go ahead and consider adopting this as the zoning map, knowing that we've got it to this point much more accurate than perhaps what the others were, and this is what we're going to use going forward. That's what the consideration is here. And again, it's this map with 4 changes, so those changes should be ready any day. But it's just a process we've been working through. It takes a lot of time, and that is the map that has the property on Blueberry Hill. That's how, that's included in there. There's a number of properties down below town, Couchwood Drive, Brown Street, Pine Street area that changed that are on there. There's changes up in the Greenway Boulevard range that are on there. There's some changes along the highway that are on there, but that is going to be what I believe to be the most accurate thing we have at this point. We could spend more time going back further and looking at more, or we could just say this is going to be our map going forward.
We could do that, but in spare time, we could go back further and see how many more mistakes we can find.
So we could. I don't know that they would rear their head at this point if they haven't in the last 16 years, or they can come out, or we could.
Dan, do you want us to approve this map tonight?
Just a minute, Bill. I'll get that in just a second. I'm sorry, Greg.
Sometimes you need to quit looking.
I'm okay with that too.
Yeah.
I think Dan's done a good job on it. I think it's pretty close right there.
So once you get the 4 question marks incorporated, you're done.
That's correct.
And you want to adopt this map.
I
Once
do.
those 4 changes are made.
I would like to adopt this map with the 4 changes that are imminently going any day.
You want to do that tonight?
I would like to, rather than put it off another month, because then we'll have, Chad, do we need to go to the city council with that, or is that the planning commission can do that?
It would go to the city commission too. So what we're looking for is a recommendation on the updated map. If everything looks good, I don't know if everybody wants to go through and look at it in detail, but if we make all those changes from what Dan has said, I think we'll be in compliance with all the ordinances that have been passed by your city commission. So we'd just be recertifying this map to say that from this date forward, we believe this to be correct based on ordinances that have passed, and then going forward, this is what the zoning is currently. So in case we run across any other mistakes.
And we're just recommending it to the city council.
Yes, sir, that would be correct.
Okay.
I'll make that motion to recommend this to the city council.
I'll second.
This map plus the 4 additions.
Yeah.
Yes,
Is there a second?
I did, Bill Grady.
Got it, Grady. Okay. Any further discussion on this issue?
We need to vote.
Okay, call the roll.
Chairman Moore,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Jones. Aye. Secretary Davis, aye. Commissioner Bobby Dawson. Bathroom break, probably. Jim Lewis. Aye. Joe Rundgren.
Aye.
He made the motion. All ayes, except for Bobby, he's in the bathroom.
Okay.
No, I've
Dan-
been cut off. I can't hear.
How'd you vote, Bobby?
I haven't been able to speak. I've been muted.
No.
I can hear everything.
Okay.
Just vote aye, Bobby. Jim voted for you, Bobby. Go ahead, go on back to sleep.
Okay.
I can hear everything going on, but I can't say nothing until now.
Yeah.
We hear you. Okay, we ready for item 11C then? Okay, consideration of request for annexation by property owner tax map 089 parcel 056.03.
Bill, this is getting pulled from the agenda.
Property owner request.
Oh, pulling it out?
Pulling it out. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have done that before we started.
Okay. Item 11D, consideration of requirement to combining substandard lots, page 30 to 31.
Okay, that's something I put on there that I have questions on, couldn't find out the answers on, and maybe you guys can help me out a little bit. But we have some ordinances that say when you're, let me see if I see what page they're on here.
30.
Page 30.
Close enough.
All right, page 30. Now, page 31 is actually the words right out of the ordinance. And we're kind of sort of looking at number 3 right here, where 2 or more lots of record with continuous frontage are under the same ownership, or where a substandard lot of record has continuous frontage with a larger tract under the same ownership, such lots shall be combined to form one or more building sites, minimum requirements of the district in which they are located. Yeah, what I was looking for on that, the reason I wanted to discuss that is I'm gonna have a little trouble finding out who enforces that besides me as the person writing permits and stuff. Is that just say I'm not going to write permits for anything on a lot that would be substandard? Is that substandard for the zone that it's in, or is that substandard as per 15.06, which is right down below that on page 31? And if it is, then at what point, if a person doesn't get a pull a permit at that point, does that not get enforced, or how does that work? Well, maybe. Hey, Chad, you know, you were talking about that rule about the 25 foot from the center line, and if the property gets divided, you automatically donate the 25 feet.
Correct.
How does that get enforced?
That usually only comes into play when you're subdividing property.
So that would be by the person reviewing that for the subdivision. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that's sort of the way we've always enforced this section too. It's when we end up in a situation where someone comes and requests a variance, or the development they're proposing for a property doesn't fit. If it's determined they own adjacent lots that could be combined to do away with the need for all of those variances, then that's what would be required. And that's what this section is really getting at.
So I have at least 3 cases right now where this is very pertinent to the builder or developers. And my question becomes, is this just about timing of ownership, or what?
Who did that go to, Dan?
Oh, I'm sorry, Chad, that was a question. Did you get that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were asking me. So something Dan and I talked about on the phone about this section too. You know, he's given you the example of what you do about dedicating right-of-way when you're subdividing on a narrow street or narrow right-of-way. There's a requirement to give up part of the front of your lot to go toward that right-of-way. So one thing we talked about in this situation that's of a similar note is if you had a 50-foot wide lot, that's really considered to be a substandard lot by your zoning ordinance. If it meets the requirement down here at the bottom about the absolute minimum lot size, this says that no building permit should be issued on any lot that is less than 7,500 square feet or that's less than 50 feet in width. So that means it's a buildable lot. But by the zoning district, whatever zoning district may be in, R1, R2, R3, there's certain minimum lot size requirements and there's certain minimum width requirements for that. So if it fell below those standards, that would be considered a substandard lot, in which case if they had adjoining properties, they would be required to combine those. But then the loophole is if you were a property owner and you just bought some of these existing 50-foot lots all over town, you bought one on Oak Street and one on Dayton Street and one on another street, you'd be allowed to build on it. But in some ways, though, if you do buy adjoining lots, you get penalized by being required to combine those properties too. So you can see it both ways. They have additional property where they can make it comply with your regulations, but then, like I said, if you just bought a lot here and there and you didn't own any adjoining lots, that requirement wouldn't come into play, and you'd be allowed to fall under this section 1506, in which case, as long as you're above 7,500 square feet and at least 50 feet wide, you could get a building permit.
Don't we have some lots in town that don't meet this? They
Yeah,
would be defined as substandard lots.
yes, sir. I'll give you an example. Jimmy Shipley just bought 3 on Richmond Street. So, I mean, if essentially I can deny him a permit,
Because they don't.
but if Jimmy sells 2 of them to Ted and builds on one, and then Ted sells him another one, and then, I mean, it's all a question of timing, so I could go out here and buy 2, 3, or 4 in a row. When I do that, if I close on one today and leave the other 3 under contract, I don't own them all 4 at the same time. I don't have to combine the lot. I don't know. I guess that's what I'm saying. When it goes into, I mean, the same thing with Jimmy Harrison up there on that. He bought an additional lot, owned the lots at the same time. It has to roll in by ordinance. So how does this play out? I've got a little bit of confusion there about how a man works that out, if you understand what I'm saying.
We've been confused about that for a long time.
We might not have an answer tonight, but I just want to bring that out because to me that direction is kind of important.
Get the right food here for the workshop and we'll have a good answer. We better bring a lot of food, because there's a whole lot of discussion in this workshop. That's right.
I did check around. Athens has the exact same. Chad, you didn't write this one, did you?
Well, most of these were written when we were in state local planning, and the majority of them look the same from city to city.
Okay. Well, that's what I was noticing.
And so we did write Athens at one point, yes.
Okay.
If I got a substandard lot 1, I can build on it. If I got 2 together, then I have to buy one.
Okay, so did we lose City Hall?
Looks like we've lost them there for a minute.
This is Adam from the fire department. I don't know. We had a pretty good sized power outage just a little bit ago. Quite a bit of town was out of power. I don't know. That may be, mine's back on at the house, but they may have lost it there at City Hall.
They're back on now, it looks like.
Other Avenue, car come around the curve, girl said she's ready for a cigarette, probably not cut the pole off, even the ground, dropped every line in on Delaware Avenue, so the whole south end's out of power, part of the middle district, it's a mess. And while that pole's back, the other cars ran into each other, coming up to the scene, so it's a good one down there right now.
Was it used to call it a service cluster?
Yeah,
That's it.
that's exactly what it was. I pulled up, that's what I went right with.
I played the thing, the huckabuck.
Yeah.
Bill, you want to roll that into the workshop?
Dan, did you get the information you expected on substandard lots?
No, sir. I really wasn't sure that we'd get an answer tonight. I just want to get everybody thinking on it. I was open for an answer if we had one, but I'm not sure I know what it says for me to do if somebody comes in for a permit, but like I said, I'm dealing with this in 3 places right now that I know of right now.
But
So,
did Chad say that other communities have the same law as us? Or same
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So they're ambiguous too.
Under the circumstances which you inherited this job, which we all understand how things get where somebody comes to me and I say, yeah, I'm gonna do it, and we'll write it down and we don't necessarily get around to it, we forget it, things, we had a lot of that going on. There's a lot of loose ends, a lot of different things that we need to get. We need to get this workshop as soon as we can. And I think we can work it in the governor clamp on us to be off here for long. And we can still get it in there. We need to get it in because we've all realized that we need to do all of this stuff over a period of time. And you and in the meantime, everything comes up, we need to look into it and get it done. Get back online and on track, and then we can do without Chad up there. I mean, he can stay in Chattanooga instead of coming up here.
I'm good with that.
Not that we don't want him up here, but.
Hey, we can do it this way too. This way works just as well.
Okay.
Yep.
We ready? Dan, are we ready for item 11?
I'm ready to move on, yes.
Okay, do you have any other items?
I do not.
Does anybody else have any other business?
We adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we're adjourned.
I don't have a clock.
I got it. I got it. 6:24.
23, we adjourned out. 24, we started this one. You ready?
Yes, sir.
I need to read this executive order again. No, we read it. All read it? Yeah. Okay. Secretary, call the roll.
Chairman Jones,
Here.
Vice Chairman Bill Moore,
Here,
Secretary Davis is here. Charles Davis never did show up, did he? Joe Runyon. Here. We got a quorum, Dan.
Thank you. Everybody read the minutes of the previous meeting.
Make a motion, we approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Davis. Roll call.
Chairman Jones,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Moore,
aye.
I'll vote yes or aye. Joe Runyon.
Aye.
We got them all, Ted.
Okay, thank you. All right. Special cleanup. We've already done the, thing on Jimmy.
That's correct.
We can go, just get it in. You've got the minutes on that.
Yeah, we got it.
And anyone else have anything in the old business? Or any new business? Dan, do you have anything? You want to get to us?
Just get in the minutes about a workshop.
He's already got that in the minutes.
They're in that with our planning.
I'm good.
I can continue to.
Made that pretty easy.
We'll make the motion to adjourn, I second.
Sir, quickly before you move on with that, this is for the BZA, this is where we actually have a decision to make on the variance for Mr. Harrison's property. It's letter A under the old business.
What was that?
So you need the motion to refuse the variances requested on the property?
Well, that's up to this board, sir.
That was a procedural question, right, Grace?
Yes.
That was a procedural question there, Chad.
Yes, sir. That we'd be looking for a motion either for or against these variances that Mr. Harrison has requested.
I thought we had a delay on this until we had our workshop on those.
Yeah, but what we said was we were not gonna do multiple variants. We were gonna look at a workshop on or perhaps writing small townhouse development.
We need a motion to reject. Make a motion to reject.
Right. We got it, Chad. I did.
That's under 1 hour and 30 minutes.
Ready to vote? Ted Jones. Aye. Bill Moore.
Aye.
I vote yes. So the motion's here.
Yes.
BZA. One more motion. We go home, go to sleep.
Make a motion, we adjourn. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Everybody votes yes. Right.
Thank you, Adam, Chad, Bill. Appreciate it. All
Gentlemen, have a good evening.
Thank you.
right, good night.
Was he here? No, he hasn't.